Hello, everyone. Welcome to Amateur Hour. This is the show that focuses on fighters that are just starting out of their careers, finding out what training methods and mentalities they have as they work their way into being a professional. Speaking of, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest tonight, Mariah Castro. Mariah is coming off of her professional debut for Combate Global and a unanimous decision win. So, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's Sunday, got my training in, so the rest of the day I've just been relaxing till I had to get on here.
Well, glad to have
How
you
you
on.
doing?
Trying to figure out how the parenting thing works. It's on the third one. We're still trying to figure it out. You are coming off of your professional debut. However, you didn't start your journey this past couple weekends ago. It started a while ago for you. So I was very curious to know, kind of how you got to MMA in the first place. What drew you to mixed martial arts? Hey everyone, just wanted to remind you all to take a moment to like the video, leave a comment. It really does help us out with the algorithm. If you'd like to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification, which will give you updates on when new content is posted. If you want to support the site, you could check out our Patreon. You'll get access to exclusive content, access to the Discord, and much more. And now, back to the video.
I think as a kid I was always pretty athletic, so I did play almost every sport that was available to me. The one that I didn't do is the one I probably should have ended up doing is wrestling. That probably would have been practical now. But it was just always like I could pick up a sport. It just didn't stick with me. I didn't see like the practicality in it. And I was always I liked contact sports, like more aggressive. So, I got in when I was young, I got into karate, a lot of kids do. And then from there, it kind of evolved. I started jujitsu when I was about 14.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went off to high school, kind of got a social life. So I broke from it for a little bit. And, I grew up in that time. I got to college. While I was in college, I revisited jujitsu, which I think was a good time because you need to be a more mature person to commit yourself to something like that. You know how people say it's a lifestyle. So I just wasn't ready for that lifestyle. But by the time I got in, started training jujitsu, I was like, okay, now I want more. I want to add in striking. And it just all came together. And, when I ended up at Carnicel MMA, it was pretty clear that I found my home, for MMA, and that I wanted to fight. So yeah, I
Well,
was, and I was a fan of MMA before I
mhm.
started training. I should say, I did watch, and I used to play the UFC games on PlayStation.
They've gotten worse, don't worry. Much worse. But I was actually going to ask, how did you arrive at Carnicel MMA? What brought you to their doorstep?
Um, so one of my coworkers knew that I was looking for somewhere to train. I was at this spot that was strictly jiu-jitsu, and I wanted to, kind of move on to something where they did offer striking and everything. And he actually happened to know Paul Carnicella, and he was like, "Listen, I know this guy. He owns a place. Stop by, see if you like it." He would take classes there himself sometimes, so when I got in, the first day I got the hell beat out of me. And then I was like, this is all right. This is it. This is where I belong. I just felt at home, and the environment was it's a smaller gym. So you have like a family aspect there. You could definitely see the sense of loyalty and everything.
So I want to actually ask you a little bit about how you transitioned from pure jiu-jitsu to MMA and what the early focus was on in those training sessions when you were before your first amateur fight even started. How did they transition you to an MMA style from jiu-jitsu?
Well, I only had a little bit of jiu-jitsu training by the time I got
Mhm.
to Carnicella, so I still had a lot to be done there anyway. But the priority, I think, became boxing, just so that the first developments were going to be foot position and throwing punches correctly, like all the fundamentals, balance, things like that. And then you start to work in footwork, and then I feel like the kicks and things like that come a little bit later, once you get your footing. So I think that was really the focus. I did a lot of boxing when I first, on pads, on like drills, everything was boxing heavy just to get that established. And then we started working in other elements. And, the whole time, obviously, I was taking the jiu-jitsu classes. We offer wrestling classes, and then I started going to those private sessions with the fighters, doing the sparring sessions, stuff like that, so I got worked in.
And it's interesting that you focus so much on the boxing because, as time has gone on, you obviously have kept that grappling route, front and center. Particularly, you could see that in your last fight. But before we get to there, I wanted to ask you about your experience in particular with Flex Fight Series. You became their title holder, which is pretty impressive. I fought for them once. Great production, awesome from my experience. So I was curious about your experience going up through the Flex Fight Series ranks and fighting for them and getting their belt.
So that was one of the more fun promotions that I've dealt with. As far as they put on a great show, I really had no issues, like those typical amateur show issues, commission issues, little silly things that you have happen at amateur shows because they're not, they don't cover everything. But Machi, specifically Chris Machi, my relationship with him throughout the whole thing, he honestly, he was looking for a fight for me for the longest, couldn't find one locally. He flew somebody in for me, which is for an amateur fight. A lot of promotions are not willing to do something like that, cover another fighter's flight and stay. So my experience with him has been nothing but positive, especially a lot of my teammates fight for him as well. And they've all had positive experiences. One of my teammates is the flyweight title holder for them. I have an 80, I believe, I don't know if it's 189 catch weight title holder at my gym. So we've had a good experience with him. I felt like all the dealings were professional, pretty much.
Yep, that's pretty much been my experience with them as well. And speaking of, your experience with them and moving on to your professional debut, what were the specific markers that your coaches were looking for with you? Was it just, being able to get that belt meant that they felt that you were ready and that you should move into being a professional? Or were there specific technical markers that they wanted you to have before making that jump?
So it was going to be a minimum 8 to 10 fights, amateur fights. That's my coach's general rule with people. He likes us to have anywhere between 8 and 10 fights, depending on the type of person you are, type of fighter you are. So he definitely, has that standard in play. But I think having an amateur title is almost like a rite of passage, before you turn pro. It's nice to have something like that, before you turn professional. It's part of the experience, I feel. And that's what amateur is about, right? It's about getting experience. So making the most of that experience, I was happy to have, the 8 MMA fights and then the 1 kickboxing fight, using up as much as I could. Because, keep in mind, we did lose a year of me not fighting to COVID. So I had that 1 year where I wasn't fighting. And so, it was kind of hard because I felt like, oh, well, now I lost a little bit of time. I got to get it moving. So I tried to stay active.
Right. And speaking about staying active, I actually wanted to talk to you a bit about your training because there's certain things I noticed in your debut that I want to talk about. Particularly, we'll start with grappling. It's my base. It's what I enjoy the most. And your grappling seems to be really well put together. You have a very cohesive game. It seems like there's purpose with the way you're approaching things, where your entries into the clinch, the outside trip, into the and stop control. You use very good weight distribution, which I think is very important and is kind of overlooked a lot in MMA for some reason. And your ground and pound is very effective and it's well timed. So I wanted to ask you about the methods that you guys have in your gym, because it's not as common as it should be to see such a well put together game, especially for someone so early in their career.
First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. And we do a lot of so we'll do these rounds, which we did today, even that'll be divided between the wall work and ground. And it's almost like you're just like shark tanking. You know, you do it at the end of your sparring session where you're kind of tired and you work these bad positions, these situational positions. And, you know, then you reverse roles. So we definitely we push it in the safest way possible, I would say. You know, nobody's out there getting hurt, but we're definitely working, you know, rounds on rounds. We train longer rounds too. For sparring, we'll do 6-minute rounds sometimes. Even before the professional debut, I was doing 5-minute rounds, you know, even as an amateur. So we've always kind of trained like professionals, so to speak. That's been like the theme of my gym all throughout. You know, the professionals that we have, the amateurs that we have, everybody trains the same. We all train together. So I didn't feel, even though it was a pro debut, it wasn't foreign to me. You know what I mean? The positions, those were all things that we worked, that ground and pound, the elbows, stuff like that.
So the next thing I wanted to actually discuss with you is your striking, because there was, like I said, it was a very cohesive game, the way you struck into the clinch, but the way you also brought those knees up the middle constantly, both coming forward and going backwards. I liked a lot of the way that you were trying to work in those stance switches as a way of getting your leg out of the way of some of those kicks, getting your shoulder in the way of some of the punches. So I was curious if there are any fighters that you specifically emulate who do that a lot. For instance, from this past weekend, Corey Sandhagen, and also kind of how you fell into that style. What drew you to fight like that? Was it just your coaches directing you that way? Yeah.
I really have to say that's something that I developed in recent months, in recent fights. My coach implemented that. He's a big fan of footwork. And we started working stance switches. And honestly, I love it. I've been using it now. I feel like it keeps people, you know, you don't know what my power hand is. You don't know what my jab hand is. So it's nice to work that in there. And it keeps your feet in position as opposed to, you know, skirting the cage, you know, sidestepping. You know, I like to try to keep my feet in position to throw punches. But yeah, I definitely have to credit him. Another fighter that I feel like uses that great footwork is Rose Namajunas. I've always been a fan of her boxing and footwork. So if I had to say, I'm not trying to emulate her, but I have to say that I would hope to get some of those qualities in there.
And I actually wanted to also talk to you about the third round of that particular fight, because it was a bit rough. She was landing some combinations, or at least seemed to be landing, where I feel like a lot of them were glancing blows, kind of landing on the shoulder or hitting the collarbone as opposed to the chin. But tell us about that. I wanted to know what was going through your mind in that third round, and what kind of adjustments you were trying to make throughout that round until you got that takedown. Yeah, talk to us about that experience.
So I don't know if you know, but they do open scoring.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I knew that I was up the 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I knew there was a chance that she would know. I don't know, you know, if her coaches told her. I got the feeling at the end that they didn't. But we just planned like, okay, she's down 2 rounds. She's going to come out a lot more aggressive because she needs a finish, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that round I started to feel a little bit tired because of, you know, backing up circling and things like that. And then I got my second wind and went for the takedown pretty much. My coach was calling for it nonstop. That's what he wanted in the third, especially to neutralize the aggression. Obviously someone's coming at you because they know they need a finish. So it was to use that forward momentum for a takedown. That was basically, I was trying to time that the whole time. I'm like, okay, when do I shoot? And then, you know, finally I got the opportunity, I felt, and I shot in. And, you know, that was just it's kind of with the takedowns, I was hoping, and the grappling, I was hoping that would tire her out too. You know, just being on bottom, I noticed that she was breathing kind of heavy. So I'm like, okay, she's not really a grappler. So this is, you know, this drains her more than the stand-up does, so to speak. And then, you know, when I got that takedown, I knew that last, when she got back up, that last 30 seconds or so, she was going to come, you know, trying to take my head off.
after the fight, what are some of the takeaways that you had from the fight coming away? It's your professional debut, getting that win, having to deal with some adversity in that third round. What were your coaches and you able to take away from the fight, both positive and some of the negatives that you're able to take and stuff that you found that you could work on?
So for me, I would say the positive takeaways are that I stuck to a game plan, which is really important, especially in professional MMA. Is like it's easy to go out there and do whatever it is that you want to do, because it's easy to get sucked into a brawl, to fight with your ego, to drown out your corner, whatever it is that people do. It's easy to do that. But what's hard is sticking to a game plan, going out there and saying, okay, plan A is to box from the outside, keep straight punches, you know, keep your range. If that doesn't work out, we're doing takedowns. And so for me to be able to execute that, that was my positive takeaway. You know, managing, say, I don't want to say pressure, but everybody feels some sort of pressure for their professional debut. And then, you know, like managing that, being on a, like with a top 5 organization in somebody else's backyard, because my opponent was from Florida. So, you know, dealing with all those things, that was a positive takeaway. What I will say is immediately, you know, when I start to evaluate the fight, I have to get more confidence in my wrestling, because I do, you know, I have good wrestling. We train that, but my confidence is not there for, you know, taking the shots. I'll miss some opportunities because I was overthinking it, so to speak. So I need to be more confident in just shooting the takedowns, because I was getting them. So I need to hesitate less and just kind of go for it the same way I would with my punches, you know, kind of deal.
So just a bit more of a questions about your team, and just the general processes that your coaches and your team go through. You mentioned some of the drilling or the live sparring is positional and stuff like that, but what's the general approach that your coaches take towards coaching, and how do they deal with things like recovery, stuff like that, things that most people won't necessarily think about when it comes to training?
So my coach is the one that introduced me to the chiropractor and physical therapist that I see. So, you know, I go there about 3 times a week. I get, you know, full body work done before I go train. So he's definitely big on the recovery. And then we do, you know, not everything is 1,000%, right? In the training, a lot of it, we do technical training. So it's not like you go in there and you kill yourself every day. He's very smart about, you know, spacing out your sparring days and you know, placing your strength and conditioning days on certain, you know, not to interfere so that you're not sore, right, going into your sparring session. So he's very, very calculated about what he has us do. And that's what, you know, he has a boxing background himself, not just jiu-jitsu. So I like that he has that well-roundedness. He also did sambo for a number of years. So he's as experienced in the last 30 years, you know, he's been training and doing these things. He's almost as experienced as it gets. So I feel like he leaves no stone unturned with stuff like that.
Last question actually about this, but just, you mentioned that you do a lot of technique drills and stuff like that. Are anything particularly unique that he might do that others won't, or is it more things you would just generally associate with fighting, you know, striking drills or grappling drills, stuff like that? Or does he have some more unique, interesting, esoteric stuff?
So obviously during the jiu-jitsu class, you keep it strictly jiu-jitsu, whether it's gi or no gi. Those drills are going to be, you know, related to that. But we do a lot of private sessions, or what I, you know, like for fighters, we do our group sessions separately a lot. And it's a lot of basically, you know, getting out from bad positions, getting taken down, getting back up, you know, and switching roles, things like that, ground and pound drills, and conditioning as well, because you're going from doing say pad work to going to ground and pound to doing sprawls and wrestling shots, things like that. So we have like a number of different drills, some more technical and then some a little bit more cardio related, so that you can go from grappling to striking to grappling to striking, because that's what exhausts people, right? Going from one to the other. So we do a lot of that.
Well, that's about it for me. I wanted to, of course, say thank you for joining me. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure. I want to obviously give you a chance to shout out your team, your Instagram, any sponsors you might have. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for following up after the fight. I really appreciate that. And I just want to shout out my team, Carnicel MMA, my coach, Paul Carnicella. I want to shout out Durante Physical Therapy and Soretto Chiropractic for taking care of me. Much needed. And I would also like to shout out my sponsor, Mom's Basement MMA. And thanks again.
Well, again, it was a pleasure to have you. You can't come. I don't know if we can have you back on Amateur Hour after your second pro victory, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure out another show, one of the podcasts. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Hopefully, you enjoy the interview. What's your handle again?
Mariah Castro MMA.
Mariah Castro MMA. We're going to put it all below anyway in the description. So thank you very much and have a great night.